Thanks everyone for coming to this session today. My name is Rashmi Avancha and I'm a customer success engineer at Sumo Logic. And the topic for today's session is going to be an API first approach to Sumo Logic. I, as a customer success engineer at Sumo, work with customers on a day-to-day basis, mainly as the technical subject matter expert on the product and help them implement various use cases based on what they want to accomplish with the product itself. What that helps me do is it gives me insights into all the different sorts of use cases in different industries, sometimes cases that even I or my team might not have thought about, and it's always an exciting opportunity to be in that role. So in today's session, the three main points I want to cover and what I hope you take away are: one, why API first? Why go API first at all if your current solution is working fine for you? Point number two, what Sumo Logic APIs are available right now for you to use? And number three, now that you learn about all of this, how do you automate your own solutions based on your own ideas using Sumo APIs? So jumping into our main question here, why API first? Let me describe this to you using a personal story of mine as I was using Sumo Logic and dog fooding the product internally within the organization. We have an organization called Sumo on Sumo, which is essentially pulling all of our product logs into a separate Sumo Logic instance. And what we do in that instance is get trends and stats based off of customer usage, and then do reporting as well as alerting on top of that data. But the job assigned to me in this case was to normalize all of the email addresses in that account to our official Sumo Logic email addresses so that we can implement single sign-on on that organization. Seems simple enough, but the way we had that set up was kind of complicated when we first started off. It was a startup. We threw in multiple aliases in there, just added pluses and all sorts of special characters in the email addresses. And so if I had to go ahead and change those manually, it would take me 2 days to go in and change each separate user's email address. But with the user and role management API, what we were able to do was just write a simple script to pull all of the users from the org and then match it with a regular expression. If there's an alias, change it. If the domain is different from sumologic.com, change it. And that just took like half an hour to develop and 5 minutes to run. And that's it, bam. In 5 minutes, all of the email addresses are changed, and I can go ahead and implement SSO on the org. So that story just goes to say that as you start thinking API first, and as you start thinking about automating your processes, you can save hours of research and implementation time. And that just speaks volumes about your developers' time, your architects' time, and Sumo Logic is an extra tool on top of your day-to-day activities. So if you can automate the different functions within that product, it just makes your life that much easier. So let's take a look at what all APIs are available right now, and which of them are generally available, which of them are in beta, and what's coming up. Looking at the GA column, if you see the last two, it highlights them with an asterisk. The reason why is that these were the older APIs that we had. If you were here at Illuminate 1 year back, these were the only two APIs we had at that point. And if you look at this whole screen now, you can see how much we grew and how much the suite has expanded. Another point to note about all of our newer APIs is that we build them out using a Swagger specification. So that makes it all the more easier for any developer to generate their own API client and then start their development on top of that. So GA, we have user and role management, We have ingest budgets, which is one of our newer features. If you're not aware of what that is or how that works, it pretty much allows you to set budgets and controls over your collectors to make sure that you're not going over a certain limit. Content management, which is basically all of your search queries, dashboards, anything that you have set up in your library, you can perform operations on that using our API. What do we have under beta right now? So most of the settings, if you're an admin, you must be familiar with all of these topics listed down there. Field extraction rules, partitions, schedule views, the different connections or webhooks, and metrics monitors are all under beta. If you want access to them, you can always reach out to your account management team and we can have it turned on for you. Coming next, exciting stuff. Right now we have access to content management, but we don't have fine-grained dashboard management yet. So while you can export a dashboard into a JSON, you cannot change individual panels, for example. So that's under development. Metrics query, like the search job API for logs, the metrics query search job is under development. Alerts, identity and access management, context management, as well as we have a Terraform provider under development. So all of these to power your automation use cases. Before we dive in and start taking a look at different customer use cases and stories from the field, I just want to make sure there are a few points that you keep in mind. So keep in mind that search job API access is enterprise only, so you need to be on one of our enterprise plans in order to use that particular API endpoint. APIs, just like Sumo Logic as a product, we have tightly coupled role management with the different users. The role permissions translate to API access privileges as well. So if someone does not have collector management permissions on the product, then their access key will not be allowed to call the collector management API. And we also have rate limiting in place for all of our endpoints. So just take a look at our help docs before you start implementing different methods with our API endpoints to make sure you're not hitting those. Another point to keep in mind, check that the endpoint you're trying to hit is not in beta. And even if it is, you can reach out to us, have it turned on, and then start using it. And some features are still under development. So just keep in mind that if you're trying to export something and you're able to do it only partially, that might be the reason why. You can always reach out to us to confirm that that's the case. We always have a dedicated team for you at Sumo to help with any of the use cases. All right, so that sounds great. How do I try it myself? So you looked at all of the different endpoints that are available, and you're curious now to get your hands dirty with your own set of code. So let's talk about Swagger. I mentioned this in passing just now in one of our slides. What Swagger does, if you're not already aware of it or if you've never used it before, it's very straightforward. You just go to the Sumo Logic API docs and copy the spec, paste it in a Swagger editor, and what it allows you to do is it generates your own API client or server in a language of your choice. So if you're a Python guy, just say Python, generate my API client, and it gives you pretty much a wrapper on top of all the API definitions that we have right now. And then you can pretty much call whichever method you want and start developing that way. It just brings you one step closer to direct code instead of trying to understand what the endpoint is and then coding it into your scripts. All right, let's talk customer stories and use cases. This is my favorite part because being someone that works within field tech on a day-to-day basis, it's just really invigorating and insightful to learn about all the use cases that have been successful and that have been implemented by customers. And it just gets a lot of reuse. So one time we figure out that this is how you do it using the API, and the same kind of use case keeps cropping up again and again, and then we can help our customers to use the script or the same method. So through these set of stories, I just want to take you through some very specific use cases that I've worked with customers on, or some of my colleagues have, and then they shared this with me. And then just quickly talk about which API we used to accomplish the solution for that particular ask, and how easy it was to put in place. So the first one I have here, and I'm sure I heard this kind of request from literally every customer that I worked with, which is I want to have an automated collector setup or a playbook pretty much to have my local collectors going up and down based on how our auto scaling systems get spawned. So imagine you're on EC2 and you have your different EC2 hosts coming up and down based on a particular policy, and then as an architect you don't want to be going and installing collectors on there all the time. So you can use Chef or Puppet, something like that, have a playbook, and use our API V1 collectors, which is our collector management API endpoint, to define how you want collectors to go up. So you can define a rule that says if this system is going up, then have the collector go up. You can set something called an ephemeral flag, which makes sure that if a collector has been inactive for a certain amount of time, it just dies, and then when you need something new, it gets spawned up again. So that's a great use case for a collector management API. Going to the next case, this is oriented towards our search job API, which is basically, think about executing a search using our query language on the Sumo Logic UI. You can do the same thing through a script. So once you have a query that works, and you maybe want to take those results and port it into a different tool, or you want to programmatically massage that data and put it in separate kinds of reporting. The search job API is perfect for that kind of a use case. To give you an example, we internally use something like this for our health checks. So if you're an admin, or if you've ever been in one of the calls with your account management team, chances are high that you sat through our health check calls. What we do is we pull reports based on customer usage and then show it back to our customers on how your searches are doing, what your ingest trend is looking like, what kind of dashboards are getting views, feature usage breakdown, just all of the data like that. Search job API is really versatile and powerful. So please, if you have any good use cases for that, go ahead and give it a try. And then jumping into one of our new API endpoints, which is the content management. This is something I got from a colleague of mine, and the customer here is Samsung SmartThings. And they, being a really large customer of ours, they have a lot of content and many alerts that fire off of their Sumo Logic account. And what their admin wanted to do is they wanted to set alerts on top of their existing alerts. So think of it as a query that queries their existing queries. So, and then they started looking at insights on how many people are looking at those alerts, if they're just dead alerts pretty much and nobody is using them. And they built a dashboard out of that pretty much to get an idea of how much content they have in there and how much of that is really useful. So that's a great use case if, as an admin, you want to track or audit your existing content and queries and dashboards and stuff like that. Another great use case for the content management API, which again we started implementing internally, is just to have a way to extract everything that you have in your library and pull it into a JSON. And you can either save it in a local folder or just push it to GitHub or whatever you use for version control. How that helps you is, say you have a service account or a shared account where multiple people have access to it, and they're just changing things on a daily basis, you don't know when a certain thing got changed. So having it in version control helps you roll back if things go wrong, but it also helps you keep track of where you were yesterday compared to where you are today in terms of content. And the last use case that I quickly wanted to talk about, and this is very similar to the story I shared at the beginning of our session, which is around changing email addresses of different users within Sumo Logic. This can also apply to changing roles. So say you have different teams using Sumo at your organization and somebody's role changed, or you are starting to rethink how you assign privileges and you want to reassign roles to different users. You can pretty much throw all of that in a CSV and then call our role management API to remap roles within your organization. So the users endpoint listed here, as well as the roles endpoint that you can find on our docs, are super useful to change anything in terms of how your users are assigned, if you want to bulk delete a bunch of inactive users, if you want to remap roles and activities like that. All right, and a quick slide here to point you to existing tools and scripts that we have right now. What we're planning to do is we have a public GitHub, which is github.com/SumoLogic, and we have a repo called Sumo Logic Content in there. So any new tools that we build out, as well as any scripts that we start building out using the new APIs, we're consolidating all of them, just making them into a customer consumable format so that you can take it easily, plug in your own access ID and key to try it out. So please check that out on our public GitHub. There's the link to our Swagger API documentation. You can just go in there, take a look at the breakdown of all the different endpoints that we have, as well as generate your own client. And then if you're not already on our public Slack, which is our Sumo Dojo, please go ahead and join that because it's a great community of Sumo Logic employees, as well as most of our Sumo Power users, I would say. So if you have any questions and you throw that up there, chances are you'll get an answer in less than 5 minutes. So I think these are all great tools. If you want to start developing using Sumo and start automating your processes, just check them out. All right, so quick summary in terms of what we covered in today's session. Number one, why API first? We talked about why it's so important to move towards an automated kind of implementation, even if it's an additional tool that you're using alongside your other development suite. Number two, what Sumo Logic APIs are available right now. If you're already using our search job and collector management APIs, just go in and check out all of the new stuff that we've built out over the last year. Our suite has, I would say, it grew exponentially. And number three, how to automate your own solutions using our APIs. So I'm not sure if the stories that I shared might be a great fit for you. They might have sparked some new ideas in terms of what you can implement yourself. So if you have any new thoughts or ideas, I'll be hanging around for Q&A, but you can also come talk to us at the expert booth and we can help you figure out the best way for you to implement it. And that is it for my session. So thank you all for attending, and I will be taking questions if you have any. So,
can you get next slide? Thanks, Rashmi.
Oh, cool.
That's good. All right. Questions here, there, everywhere. I'll start.
The Terraform provider, is that expected to cover like pretty much all the API that's exposed, or are there certain things that are coming first?
Do you want to take that, David?
All right. Okay, I'm very excited about those APIs, so I'll answer some of the questions. Our goal is to cover all the management APIs. Right now you have collection, and we have added, someone has added users and roles. We are building automation on top of Swagger to basically generate a lot of them Like, so as soon as we have an API, it will come with Terraform. There's some work left, but that's our goal. And you can already, there is a Terraform client on our GitHub account, so you can already go and use it. Mm.
Hi.
Hi.
We're Sumo users, and we constantly have trouble trying to, understand who's looking at what. I know you mentioned something about people being able to understand who's watching what alert. How do you know who's watching what alert? Like,
Okay, so
what
do
is
you
that a measure
mean like if an alert is being opened in
that,
an
okay.
email, or who's looking at a certain query within the product?
So it's after the URL is sent, somebody clicks on that. That's a measure of. What do you
Okay,
think?
got it. So
Yeah.
that might not be something that we can help address with the APIs, because
Okay.
that goes into a different product, right?
Okay.
So it might need to be tracked from
Oh.
over there. But what I was talking about is more around how many times an alert is actually firing off, and then if somebody is searching on that source category at all. So, yeah. So,
Okay.
I'm sorry.
Thank you. Yeah.
Other questions?
Can we do the same thing, like let's say like we're looking at the log search, right? We type in some query and get the results. Can we do the same thing with the search job API?
Yes,
Is that the
it's
same
exactly the same thing.
Okay.
So if you do a raw search on your Sumo Logic account, and if you want to basically replicate that through a script and get the results,
Okay.
you can do it using the search job API.
And about the budgets thing, so can we get the quota available through this ingest budgets API?
Right. So there's two ways to assign ingest budgets. One is
Okay.
through the API itself.
Okay.
But the reason we have it as an API is because we want users to be able to access all our features on the UI through the API as well. So if you have automated collectors set up, then the ingest budget API sort of goes hand in hand with that. But to answer your question, to see the quota available through the ingest budgets API, you can do that.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Thanks.
So the meta question I'll answer quickly is the APIs that are available at that endpoint, they are the same exact APIs that are used by the UI. So if something is available for the UI for ingest budget, it's available. That's what we are doing since last year. So all the new features, they'll come with everything that you can do in the UI, you can do in the APIs.
Hi, thanks for this information. This is useful. About alerts, monitoring alerts, those are beta version, right now?
Yeah, so the APIs on alerts, they're still under development.
Okay.
But we have the schedule views, the field extraction rules and all of
Is
that.
there a way to access the beta APIs?
Yes. So in order to get access to beta, you need to contact your account management team. So if you know who your account executive or your customer success manager is, or like you can reach out to your admin or account owner to have it turned on. Right.
Okay.
All right, so you're staring at the API doc, right? So everything that does not say beta is actually open beta, so it's available right now. You can access all the endpoints. If it says beta, you have to request access. So some of them are in beta, but they are basically available to everybody, as long as you have the feature, of course.
Is there any tentative date for this beta APIs release?
I am not sure I can answer that. We need to check with our product team on when it's coming out. Yeah.
Any other questions? Yes.
Yeah, I assume the search API is like quite mostly used among developers and stuff in the API. So do you see in your customers like use cases for that Sage API, like using that and like, you know, taking the data and putting it to another tool, or is there any popular tool that a lot of your customers uses?
Yeah, I have seen customers take that data and maybe pull it into Tableau for further analytics. They sometimes pull it into other APMs for application performance monitoring. So they use Sumo as their monitoring and troubleshooting tool mainly, and then to do like load testing and just monitor the health of the application, they pull those stats and put it into an APM tool. That's one of the biggest use cases I see where they put it into another. Or like something like Google Analytics or Tableau for further analysis on data. Yeah.
Anybody? Last question? No? All right. Thank you, Rashmi. Great job.
Right.